Good morning. Welcome to a tertiary world. Today I'm reading some further stories of memories that arose as I walked down each of 14 streets, 7 north-south and 7 east-west. What I'm reading from is a recounting of memories that arose as I walked down Victoria Street, the first of 7 east-west streets. Its colour is red. This is of 215 Victoria Street. Aldo Pravisani was the Australian featherweight boxing champion in the early 1960s. He was a taciturn man with a melancholy smile who moved slowly, almost indolently, to wherever he was heading. It was different in the ring. He was lightning fast and deceptive, with the fastest left jab, except perhaps for Lionel Rose's, ever seen in Australia. I was only young, but I had occasionally seen him spar in the inner city boxing school I had attended. Everything always stopped when he walked in, and people would watch him in a silent, begrudging admiration, muttering curses under their breath. I particularly remember one rainy late afternoon in July 1961. The gym was as boisterous as always, and the cacophony of people shouting, grunting and laughing was all underscored by the rhythmic thudding of leather on bag, often leather on flesh. Aldo had just arrived in Melbourne for the first time to fight the then champion George Bracken. He looked most unlikely, and despite his considerable reputation as the European featherweight champion, everyone had given him away as an ineffectual contender. This particular afternoon, I had just changed and was working enthusiastically on a mid-sized bag. I had just turned 14 when Aldo walked in. Smaller than everyone and smiling shyly, he asked through the interpreter at his side whether it was possible to find a sparring partner, because the gym he had been assigned had somehow run out. This was a normal ploy with visiting boxers. Somehow the local sparring partners they had been promised would suddenly vanish or become ill. Because Australia's isolation at that time made it impossible to quickly import any sparring partners, visiting fighters often fought important bouts, badly underdone. A more than promising middleweight, whose name I have forgotten, came out of the throng smiling. "I'll take you on, Aldo," he said loudly, looking at his gym mates, already enjoying the juicy story he would dine on for many years to come. You could see it in his eyes. I knocked out Aldo Pravisani. They both entered the ring, the middleweight towering over the slight and hunched figure. For 5 minutes he managed not to lay a glove on a smiling Aldo, though he tried his hardest. Wherever he was, Aldo wasn't. Then something strange happened. The smile suddenly left Aldo's face. It set into a focused determination. The angle of the jaw dramatically lowered, and the leading leg shuffled along the floorboards as though it was hovering. Within 30 seconds, the middleweight was out like a light, sprawled on his back, arms outstretched, a thin trickle of blood trailing from his mouth. Everyone missed it because it happened too fast. Aldo walked to the corner, poured a tin cup of water from a bucket and took it to the prone young man. Squatting, he gave him a drink, and the young man obligingly accepted it. From that day on, nothing scared me. Not the 17-year-olds in the playground at lunchtime, not the mob that usually waited for me after school. I began to learn how to stay calm and focus on the task in front of me. But the real joy came on the day my sister and I celebrated our first communion at St Mary's, Star of the Sea. After walking from the church's gloom out into the light of day through a huge bluestone arch, I can't remember a thing about the actual ceremony. We all walked across the street and down to the Don Camillo Cafe at 215 Victoria Street in order to celebrate. Aldo was there behind the counter, pulling at that ancilio machine, making coffees as smooth as you like. Once he had become the Australian champion, he had bought the bar in order to earn an income while he waited for the inevitable next local challenge. He smiled his usual sad smile at me, and noticing the white silk band on my left shirt sleeve, he vigorously lifted both his perfectly arched eyebrows and gently rasped a buona comunione to me. His forceful exhaling parted the air between us and flowed outwards towards both sides of the tiny cafe. I beamed at him, suddenly liberated from the anxious weight of religion that during the afternoon had settled like lead over me. That's how that day a sad boxer's exhalation led me to a sudden understanding of the difference between religion and spirituality. The weight of a religious life was contained within the grey, leaden stones of St Mary's, Star of the Sea. Aldo's raspy whisper contained all the illuminatingly joyful and unassuming lightness of spirituality. The things that happened inside Don Camillo's cafe. There are other stories about that, but they're not to do with this particular series of accounts. Until tomorrow, more Victoria Street stories.